Hello everyone and welcome to part 3 of our black opening repertoire guide, and we're going to be continuing our adventures in the French defence and looking at White's third most popular move, which is the move e5. So this is known as the advanced variation. It's probably my favourite variation to play against as black, as you know, you're going to get a very typical French position, and what I mean by that is you're going to be focusing on a lot of the different pawn breaks, so c5 and later f6, and White on the other hand will be focusing on trying to keep his centre together, making sure it doesn't fall apart. So this is a real test of the French. You know, really do look at these lines, as these are probably the most thematic lines to learn. And I think it's just great fun really, because it's a real fighting chess here. White is going to be getting a lot of space advantage by playing the move e5, so immediately creating this deadly pawn duo, and then hopefully flood his pieces all along the queen side. Notice the bishop doesn't move like that, but you get my idea. So it's going to be flooding loads of pieces. Meanwhile, black will be creating a plan around attacking this d4 point, and this is what I'm going to be recommending as your repertoire move in the against the advanced variation as black. I'm just going to be creating a lot of pressure on this d4 point with the move c5 straight away here. And we're just going to be flooding all our pieces along here. Later our knights are going to come in and just keep attacking this d4 point. If White is able to hold on to the d4 point, he's generally going to have a slightly better position. If White cannot hold on to the d4 point, typically black is looking to do better, in fact probably equalizing. But has to be very careful, as there's a lot of different gambit lines to be aware of in the advanced variations. So we're going to be looking at the Korchnoi gambits, so the knight d2 gambits, and then also the Milner-Barry gambit, which is another very deadly line to play against. So that's just something to be careful of. Okay, so after the move c3, so holding on to this pawn, I'm going to be recommending the queen to b6 straight away. It doesn't matter when you play the queen, I just like to play it first, as it just stops any ideas of this bishop coming to e3 immediately. And what this does is it's immediately attacking the b2 square. So now White has to be very cautious when developing this bishop, as he could be losing this b2 pawn, which also in turn attacks the rook on a1. So something he needs to be very careful of. Knights to f3, so defending the pawn, very logical move. Knights to c6, again re-attacking on d4. And bishop to d3, and this is a really interesting move, as it looks as though White is losing a pawn. But we have to be very careful, as it's a complete illusion. If we capture here, White captures back, and we go for this move, we're going to be losing the game very quickly. As now after knight captures, if we think we can take this knight, we can't, as this bishop comes in, landing the check, and now opening up a discovered attack on the queen. So just a variation to be very careful of. Don't fall into this trap and capture on this point. So this is where we have our diversion in our move order. I'm going to be recommending the move knight to h6 here. But if you do want to play a bit more sort of mainline stuff, one of the key moves here is now bishop to d7. And what this does is it stops this idea of the bishop coming here now, throwing in the check, as now the bishop on d7 guards against that. So we no longer have that threat. So now if White castles here, we have a very very interesting position. So this is actually a gambit for there's two gambit lines that white can play here now, and they are very deadly. You need to be very careful when playing against these as black. If we just simply capture here, which is a playable move after our capture here and knight capture. White has two moves here that he can play. He can either just capture the knight straight away, and after queen captures, we can get into a line known as the Milner barrier attack. So after knight to c3, notice here that black is up a pawn, but he's going to fall behind in development very, very, very quickly. And he has to be very careful, as there's some very dangerous lines here now. If, let's say, he just captures this e5 pawn, whilst this is not immediately losing, it's going to be very, very difficult position to play. If now rook comes to here, okay, let's say maybe black can get away with the move knight to c7, but he has to now be very cautious, as this is an extremely horrible position now for black. You'll see here now that this pawn cannot capture this knight as it's pinned, and also the queen is now under attack. So I've had this in a few of my games where black hasn't known what to do, because I've been playing this as white for a little bit, so it has to be very, very, very careful. So that's what kind of happens if you play captures there. So just some lines he has to be very careful of. So against this, if you do want to play for, I guess, a slight edge for black, the move I would recommend is the move a6, and that just stops any shenanigans with moves over here. So I think it's relatively solid. Okay, white's going to get a nice healthy advantage lead, but otherwise white's doing okay as well. So that's just one move to be careful of. The other move is knight b to d2, and this is known, I think, as the Korchnoi gambits. I'm probably getting my gambits mixed up, but I've also heard it's just called the knight b to d2 gambit. And the idea of this is after knight captures, let's say knight comes to e7, white is going to get a lot of different tempos on the queen. So it's just something he has to be very, very careful of. So bishop comes to e3, so hitting that queen. And if, let's say, black comes to c7, not really knowing what he's doing, then the rook comes to c1, and particularly now the queen is going to come back here, and you can see here that white is getting a very healthy lead in development. Okay, black can do this as well. This is also playable. I've seen stuff with a3 and then b4, just attacking the knight straight away. So this is playable for black. It's not a pleasant position, I would say, for black. Okay, you're up a pawn, but you're just going to be holding on for dear life for the rest of the game. It's not the sort of positions I enjoy playing on the black side. To each their own. You can play these if you want. Black does get equality in quite a lot of lines, but they are incredibly difficult to play. So just be very, very cautious of that. Okay, let's go back then. So instead of all that nonsense and all the different lines and all the difficulty stuff that we're going to need to learn, I'm just going to be recommending the move knight to h6. This is going to be continuing with our thematic ideas of just getting our knights to f5 and attacking on d4. So typically white will castle. Just one move just to be careful of. If white just captures here on h6, this doesn't work, as now we can capture on b2. And you can see here now this rook is under attack, so he's going to have to play a move like knight b to d2, and after that we can just capture the bishop on h6. And you can see here we're up a pawn, but also you know, we can use this open file now for our rook to get into the action as well later in the position. So you know, black's doing very well here. So that's just one little variation just to focus on. So yeah, so you're going to see this rook captures, and at this point we want to now take here on d4 and then play knight to f5. The reason why we want to do that, if we play knight to f5 straight away, white can just capture here and release a lot of the pressure. And in fact, there's some quite dangerous lines here that black needs to be very careful of. You can see the moves like if g4 is played here and then the knight comes back, you know, this is a trap for white, as now b4 just wins a piece. You can see here this bishop has no escape square, so it's very, very dangerous to play against. And you know, even just play b4 straight away, there's some very, very dangerous lines here. b4. It just looks horrible. But maybe just looking at the engine, maybe it is about equal though. But even then, it just looks like a horrible position. The whole game goes into chaos. So don't forget to just capture this pawn, just to avoid all that painfulness. Again, white can tempt fate and take here if he wants to. This again just doesn't work, I'm afraid, after a move like this. Yeah, we just come to f5 and then we'll attack this pawn on d4. So a nice simple plan, very easy. And white can't really hold on to this pawn, so he's going to have to get rid of his bishop pair here now. After the move, bishop takes on f5, and after e takes on f5, okay, you know, black's going to have this not particularly nice looking pawn structure. So after the move knight to c3, attacking this pawn, this is fine. We just play bishop to e6, and I've got all these different game plans here for black. So typical ideas: we want to get our other bishop to e7, castle on the king's side, and then we can look at ideas such as getting our rook to c8, so onto this this open file, and then later playing the move f6 and just attacking that center straight away. So this is very, very strong as well. So that's what to do against, that's the kind of the mainline position really to focus on. So yeah, this is, I think this is a really simple way of playing against the advance. We've got a nice thematic idea. You know, white's going to need to know what he's doing. If he tries to play moves like here again, we've got these different trap lines. We can either just we can even capture just on e3. I think this can't be too bad either, as you know, white has got this ugly looking pawn structure, and then play along like that. So yeah, there's just so many things that are kind of working in black's favour here. Alright, so going back then, there are a few other setups that that white can employ. So after knight to c6, you can also see bishop to e2, so this is also playable. I think this is a bit more difficult for white to hold though. So here we're going to capture, and then we're going to play knights to h6. Again, white can't really capture this knight on h6. So let's say he plays knight here, and we just get our other knight here, and now we haven't got to worry about the threat of capture on f5. So this is yeah, I think this is even harder for white to hold on here. There are some ideas of a4 which can be a bit annoying. I think this is a kind of a draw invitation here. You can actually come back and forth potentially. After like bishop here, you can then chuck your bishop onto b4. Yeah, so this is just some crazy stuff here. So again, this is not kind of I don't think you'll see this too often over the board, but this is just one way that white can try and hold on to his pieces, but it just looks very loose. Okay, so that's one other idea in this line. I think really this is kind of the only way that he can try and hold on, but it's quite a difficult move to spot straight away. But yeah, as you can see here, you've got just a lot of pressure on d4. It's going to be very difficult to defend this position. So again, I've seen moves like knights, bishop to e3, and again we can just capture this pawn straight away if we wanted to. That's perfectly playable, or just capture this bishop on e3 first. So yeah, that's really good. So those are the two kind of main setups. There is one more setup here that you do need to be aware of, is the move a3. Now the move a3 is, I think it's kind of played more by sort of grandmaster level. So the idea of that is pushing out with b4 and then getting the bishop to b2. So it sort of solves those problems that we encountered in quite a few lines with what to do with this bishop and how to develop it. So it solves those issues. The problem with this move a3 is black has a very strong move against it with the move c4. And personally, I don't like this line too much. I'll be recommending something a little bit different, just simply because I don't like releasing this tension in the center. I like to kind of keep those thematic plans the same. But this is very playable for black. As you can see here, he's going to be just kind of developing relatively normally, going to be trying to get his knight later on to a5 and then popping it into b3, which is a very good square for the knights to play on. You can even push if left unchallenged. You can get moves like a5 and a4 in, and then this knight is firmly anchored onto that square. But as I say, I don't really like those lines too much. So what I will recommend here instead is so capturing here, and after pawn captures, now we go back to our ideas. Just notice here now, this doesn't work so well, as I think bishop, oh no, it still works actually, I tell a lie. It still works here. But it's just a different way of reaching the same position. So yeah, knight to e7 works fine here. b4 is played, knight to f5, and now you can see here the idea of this this weird looking pawn moves is just to get this bishop onto this nice diagonal where it can hold on to this d4 point. So it solves a few issues here, but white can't really do a huge amount here. He's sort of bound to that pawn on d4, so in some ways we get a nice bit of equality here. Okay, he's wasted a few moves to kind of solve a few issues, but he hasn't really solved his main issue as to what to do now, really. So against this, again, I think black can just develop normally, get his bishops to nice squares, castle. I think he's doing fine here. So castles. I think this is a perfectly playable position for black. Okay, white maybe gets a tiny edge just due to the space that he has in the center, but otherwise, black is doing fine here. He can look at ideas now later on of playing, moves like f6, then trying to break down the center that way. Again, getting the rooks onto the open files, that tends to be a relatively good plan as well. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this brief tour looking at the advanced variation. I hope it helped, but yes, so our main ideas, we want this sort of setup where we can get the two knights attacking and also the queen attacking on d4. We tend to do quite well in a lot of variations with that. And then later on, if white is able to hold on to that, playing the moves like f6 later on in the position. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next part. We'll be looking at the advanced variation.